Okay, I'm going to continue from where we left off in the first part because something happened, an accident happened. So I'm going to continue with the lecture of Sartre. Now, Sartre, if you ask Sartre, for example, um, if he read on a tombstone somebody born in, say, 19, like him, 100 and died in 1980, and in the middle there is that little bit of a, a small trait d'union, what they called a small slash. For Sartre, neither the beginning nor the end is out of our own making. It is in between that we make our living. The whole life is that little line. This is what we make out of our lives. So man exists, he turns up in this world, and he makes himself, he conceives himself, he constructs himself. And therefore, it is a very subjective view of humanity. Man makes his choices. Man is nothing at birth. And throughout his life, he is no more than the sum of his commitments and actions. So it is at the end of our lives that we can really evaluate what we have done. Because God is not in the picture, therefore we must rely on ourselves. We must create ourselves. We must construct ourselves. But this is a description that he makes of reality of his life. And because of that, because we have no father as such, because there is no mastermind, we are in fact orphans. We are alone in this world. We are condemned to be alone. We are condemned to live with others that we don't like very much. And in this process also, because we are alone, there is anxiety, there is anguish. Man is alone in a world which he didn't make. And because he didn't make these ideas, he didn't create them, he is condemned to be living in them, but he has to deal with them. Therefore, life has nothing to offer. Life is meaningless in a way, but the meaning that life has is to be given by me to make it sensible and to make it meaningful. And I would like to emphasize here that it is through the actions of humanity, of people, of us, that make life worth living. So life is meaningless. We give meaning to it through our lives. And I want you to remember this because when we come to the other existentialist, who is Samuel Beckett, and who writes Waiting for Godot, for Samuel Beckett, life is meaningless. We attempt to give it meaning, but at the end of the day, we do not succeed, and therefore nothing is to be done. This is his sort of opening line of the play Waiting for Godot. Therefore, this universe has no maestro. Life is just happening haphazardly. Therefore, in this world, this life is absurd, meaningless. The word absurd comes from the Latin surdus, which means deaf. And sometimes when we have two people talking to each other and not communicating, we say in Arabic, hadith tarshen. They are having a discussion of two deaf people. And for him, this world is a little bit absurd in this respect. It is a world which has no meaning. It is a conversation that is meaningless. We are forlorn. We are abandoned. We are orphaned in this world. There is a lot of malaise, as discontent, as Freud talked about, and therefore we have to create ourselves. So action is the only thing that could make this meaningless world meaningful. It is by investing into creativity, into doing things, that our life is meaningful. And it is subjective. Each one of us has to make his own meaningful world. There is no general rule for this. Sartre insists that the only value of our humanity is that we are free, We are totally free. We are not chained. We are free spirits like Nietzsche. There are no external alibis for our failures, and there are no external assistance for our successes. If we are heroes, we owe it to us. If we are fiascos, we owe it to us as well. So, unlike Freud, our emotions are not outside ourselves. They are part of our life. They help us because it's a subjective world, because there are no preset rules or essences. So we are responsible for our emotions, we are responsible for our actions, we are responsible for our behaviors. And man is therefore, again, attempting to build his life and his meaning. One of the books that Sartre wrote was called Myth of Sisyphus, which means the myth of Sisyphus is a myth from Greek mythology that was mentioned in Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. It is the story of this guy called Sisyphus who was condemned by the gods to roll a stone, a rock, a boulder up towards a hill every day. And as he reached the top, every time he said, "I made it," the rock would roll back down and he would have to start all over every day. And for him, this is how our life is. It is a routine, a habit, a monotonous repetition. It is only in this decision of Sisyphus to push the boulder back again every day that life becomes meaningful. In other words, if we don't take the decision, the initiative, the striving, the action to change the pattern from day to day, life is extremely monotonous and meaningless. And therefore, in this time of Corona, as we are all sitting at home and living in this monotonous routine, everything creative that we do, everything new that we do, everything that is out of the ordinary, may be our salvation, may be our way of being able to cope with our boredom and our anxiety and our fear and our internal dramas, you know. So maybe that is another way of looking at things. Now, Sartre has written many books. What we are reading is a very small story called The Wall that comes from the World Harper Readings, as I said. It's about 10 pages. And it is the story of a human being who, well, actually, it's a story of 4 men who are in Spain during the Spanish War, the Civil War, which was against the royalists. And they are imprisoned because they are condemned to be revolutionaries. And they are going to be executed the second day. So here, Sartre is trying to study how these people would behave. How do we behave if we know that we are going to be condemned to death the next day? How do we all behave if we know that there is a sentence on us that's going to get us sooner or later? Have we, in these past weeks, acted differently because somebody is threatening us with a disease, or there is a virus going around that could kill us, all of us, tomorrow? What do we do in the meantime, and how do we behave? So this is a story that is about 4 people in a jail, in a prison, who are going to be sentenced to death the next day. But if we take the larger metaphor of this story, is the whole world a prison? Are we all sentenced to death from the moment we are born? Do we know what's going to happen tomorrow? And if that is the reality of life, if there is no paradise and no judgment day and no salvation and no savior, how do I deal with this life? And what do I do to keep myself busy? In this story, which is The Wall, one of the things that was the most difficult thing to understand for Sartre was Everything that he did, he wanted to understand. Sartre, existentialism wants to understand everything that we do, because everything that we do it responsibly. We cannot say that life acted on us. We cannot be passive. We have to be active. So if you are going to live an active life, every meaning of every action should be understood. Now, the only thing that human beings can never understand or grasp or comprehend is the concept of death. Because death happens when you're no more there. You cannot say, I died, except if you say, I died of boredom. But you cannot say, I died, because that verb is not part of your living. It's another dimension. And I want you here to take this, the experience of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh never understood the concept of death. It never meant anything to him until Enkidu died. Then it was almost as if he died. It was the closest thing, remember Enkidu was created like another Gilgamesh. And therefore, the closest we can get to the idea of death is when somebody very close to us dies, or when we are really, really in that picture of being dead the next day. And this is what's the... So I want you to go through this text and read a little bit and see if you can understand what the text is saying, and especially look at the characters. There is Pablo, there is Juan. The book was written in 1939, so we are on the eve of the First World War. There are also the sort of absurdity which lies in the story. Sometimes we lie so that we save a situation, and without realizing the lie turns out to be a reality, and somebody is either suffering or is either saved or survives because of that. If you look back at the Armenian genocide or at the wars that people have been through in the past years in Lebanon, many people say, I survived by accident. Had it not been for this particular moment or this particular person, I may not have been here today. And when you think about that, you say, oh, if life is just like that, an accident, how do I deal with it? How do I make sense out of it? So for Sartre, taking back that Nietzschean creation, because it is not God who created man, man has to create and invent himself every day. Every day we have to start all over again. A man is the future of man. Man is a superman, if you want to. And so we are alone. We have no excuses. We have nothing to lean on, and we have to come out with these methods of facing reality. Maybe we should ask Freud if he can help us to sublimate, or maybe to find intoxication, or maybe to find other ways. Life in itself is too harsh for us to accept. We have to find other means to deal with it. Now, also, I would like you to think a little bit of the symbolism of the wall. What does a wall mean? What is a wall? Is it something that keeps us in, or is it something that keeps us out? Today we talk about the wall of Trump. We talk about the wall of the apartheid that was built up in the West Bank. We talk about the walls that are sometimes used by people to write graffiti on it. Sometimes. So what is a wall? What does a wall mean for you? Are you today confined in a wall, and how do you get out? And am I coming into your wall today and breaking your walls, trying to communicate with you? So let us think about these things. So I have asked a few questions in one of the slides, and the questions are, have the characters crossed the wall of life? Is this wall a wall between life and death? Are our characters already dead? Are they behaving like dead people? The doctor complains that he is freezing while the others are sweating. So who is in the real dimension? Who is in reality? And then are we subconsciously dead when we know that we're going to die all of a sudden? Some of the remarks of existentialism is that there is no logical sequence. A does not necessarily lead to B. So here, if there is no logical sequence, again, we have to be all the time ready for any surprises. Every human being has to forge his own meaning. Because there is no beneficially good power that would make everything work for the better, things not necessarily work for the better. So, if we just look at some of these statements, for example, there is despair. This is one of the characteristics of existentialism. We are confused. There is also there is no reality for Sartre except in action. Man is nothing else but his own plan. The extent that he fulfills it, he is nothing else but the ensemble of the acts, nothing else than his life. He is the sum of all the relationships which he has. He is a totality. The coward makes himself a coward. The hero makes himself a hero. And this is a theory, according to him, therefore, that when man succeeds, he creates his own ethics. This is where Kant comes in. And out of this ethics, we have dignity. You remember when Kant said, everything has a price except human dignity. And I would like to remind you, the first article of the human rights was that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So for him, this existentialism gives dignity to man. It elevates man. It makes man worthwhile of his humanity. And therefore, there is no universal human nature, and everything is a sum of our actions, and therefore, it's a tiresome world. It is not easy, but if we succeed, then we are proud of what we have done. So I'll see you Tuesday at 10:45. Please take a Zoom account, and we'll meet as soon as we can. Thank you.